This is not a conversation that I'm having with someone on the phone. This is Dmitry Ivanovich with the naked truth. In my inquiry, which I had to resume as of June 24th, 2017, I took a recording device into Genesis West, a byproduct, an extension of the Genesis Health System that operates all through Iowa. My relationship with Genesis West began after I was beaten by two police officers who were called Bump and Thump, because for 2 decades or longer before I had met them, they had been beating the hell out of long-haired, bearded males in various establishments where they were supposed to be bouncers. It is illegal for bouncers to carry deadly force when they're wearing. They can wear their uniforms, they can wear their police uniforms, but they can't take their guns, and they can't take their nightsticks, they can't take saps, they can't take anything to physically assault you. All a bouncer is allowed to do is to pick you up by your shirt collar and the seat of your pants, and they're usually big enough to do that kind of thing, and toss you out the door. That's all they can do. But Laurel Mulvaney and Hal Wilkerson had another duty at Beethoven's Bar. They were supervising the sales of drug deals that the Turner brothers authorized. And there were people on the dance floor exchanging snow seals for money. Now, when I walked into this place, my beard was down to my dick, and my hair was down to my ass. I looked just like ZZ Top. And I'd still look like ZZ Top, except now I shave. Because when you're drawn into court for no reason, a judge wants to look at your face. You know, I have been arrested on false charges of harassment, and that's the most minor one. But I have been also accused of committing over 30 felonies. And I was able to defuse those charges myself until Michael Wolff decided, after I won a trial, after dismissing my court-appointed attorney who wanted to suppress exculpatory evidence. My record with the court and my convictions with the court on felony charges concern that issue. Suppressed exculpatory evidence. They're not allowed to do that. And right now, I have a disc which concerns that issue. I was sent that by the court after having 6 hearings. The first hearing concerning the discovery for this post-conviction relief happened over 2 years ago, when in front of myself, while I was recording the proceeding in court on my cell phone. You see, the Clinton County Police and the Scott County Police and the Scott County Courthouse and the Clinton County Courthouse have a different system. When you go to court in Clinton County, all they tell you to do is turn off your cell phone. In Scott County, they don't let you bring your cell phone. So I took extra special care that at least during one hearing, and there were 2 that I recorded. Actually, I recorded every hearing that I've ever had Clinton County Courthouse, but one of them was really interesting. Apparently, Michael Wolf, after having destroyed 4 post-conviction relief efforts, had the 5th one, he destroyed 3, and after having the 4th one handed to him by an attorney, he destroyed that too. And during a hearing, I recorded Harold DeLange telling Judge Nancy Tabor that he had taken the last post-conviction relief directly to the Clinton County attorney and left it with him. And that disappeared. Now that is grounds for disbarment. During a secret hearing that I recorded, in Clinton County, I was ordered not to go back to my home. And, they can't do that. After that happened, I talked to legal aid. I got a letter from Catherine Alexander, which I received a second copy of, which has been altered. Because in that letter, Catherine Alexander told me that I was subject to arrest if I went to Clinton County and went to my home. Since then, I've been to my house 3 times. On all 3 times, I discovered that these people were still breaking into my house and vandalizing it. My last visit, when I'm looking through my house for stuff I'm never going to find because they stole it. And there's a court record that the court was allowing people to go into my house when there should have been a crime scene tape around it. The Clinton County Police intentionally allowed that crime scene to be contaminated so I could not use exculpatory evidence, which, by the way, by now has been removed. Now, I didn't remember anything after I woke up in the burn unit of Iowa City Hospitals. But a nice old lady who happens not to be a racist, but has the unfortunate occurrence of having lived in Calamus all of her life, confided in me that she saw Emma and Valeska Stephens enter my house shortly before the explosion. And they set up a booby trap in my restroom, and when I went into my restroom and opened the door, the accelerant that they had poured over 300 VHS tapes. They wanted to destroy those tapes because they thought that I had the evidence on them about the harassment that I was undergoing in Calamus. And I underwent that harassment because my skin is a different shade than theirs. And my significant other was black. Over 30 felony warrants. Over 30 false reports. Most of which I was able to have dealt with and put under without even an attorney's assistance until the day of my first felony trial, when the court had stuck me with an attorney that they would not let me get rid of. But Judge Van Zee, seeing how this guy was conducting a case, after seeing the fact that Bill Vilmont had no questions for any of the state's witnesses, allowed me to conduct my defense, and I presented the exculpatory evidence which I had informed the judge that Mr. Vilmont had, for at least a year and a half, actively suppressed. My own attorney suppressed that evidence, but he only suppressed it because Mike Wolf wanted him to. So during that felony trial, because evidence was suppressed, I went to an Iowa prison, and I was released from that prison 3 years later, approximately. And at that time, the Social Security Administration, who knew that I was in prison because I told them, repeated an act that they had committed in 2002, when my mother had taken $24,000 out of savings, which had been acquired from Merrill Lynch, and that was the last money that was left from a $300,000 investment which had been made, which was entirely in AAA bonds. Now, for some reason, the people at Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Smith, Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Smith, it's important to remember those 5 names because Pierce, Fenner, and Smith are now spending my money in Tahiti. And John and Jim Campbell of Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Smith took a AAA bond fund without anybody's say-so and converted it into junk bonds. So my mother took the last $24,000 she was able to get out of there and put it in her savings, and on her deathbed transferred it into my Social Security account. I found out about that 2 days after she died, and I'm sitting Shiva for my mother. And I'm out of groceries, and I'm out of milk, and I mostly dairy, and I went to the store. And I didn't have food stamps because since my inception into this system, I'm always getting shit. They try to cut off my food stamps every chance they get. The last time, a public aid agency, this was in Davenport, wanted to cut off my food stamps. They took federal information and they changed it on their determination to eliminate my food stamp amount. And what they did is they wrote on their state log that I was getting twice as much money from Social Security as anyone would get. So they decided that they would send me a notice of determination in January of 2007 that since I'm getting twice as much money as I was really getting, they could cut off my food stamps. That began a 9-month odyssey, which culminated when I was finally able to arrange a telephone conversation with a hearings officer at hearing. The night before that hearing occurred, I was arrested on a false report, and I got out of jail just in time to have missed my telephone appointment. I then received a letter 3 days later saying I'd lost my appeal because I didn't show up for the hearing. 10 days later, I received my full benefit amount of food stamps. That hardly ever happens, does it? As a matter of fact, it never happens. I don't know why it did. So I continue to receive my full amount of food stamps. Meanwhile, now, Social Security is claiming I didn't receive my full amount of food stamps. And they want me to give up a large portion of what I'm receiving on Social Security, so large that I had to live in the street for 3 years. But I didn't waste my time. During my federal prosecution for something I did not do, I was able to take all my Social Security money, because I wasn't spending it on rent and utilities, and I bought myself the tools of my trade. And I had to do that because the federal government took everything I had and gave it to a person who was going to lie at a trial which was based on a false declaration. And this guy had been my friend for 30 years. So when I started to have this trouble and knew that eventually I was going to go away, and as I had been told by citizens of Calamus, Iowa, that they were going to burn me out, I was told by a guy named Walt, "I'll bet that old pile of sticks would go up in a flash." He told me that. And they were going to burn me out. And the reason they were going to burn me out is because my skin is a slightly different shade than your redneck in Calamus, Iowa. The first piece of social contact I had with anybody in Calamus, Iowa, was when a drunk staggered out of Stephen's Tap, walked half a block over to my residence, and asked me what kind of a nigger I was. Now, my parents didn't raise me that way. I don't use that word. You know, now, and this racism in Iowa extends to the court. When the people who are holding, by psychological and sometimes by actual physical means, a person who has been in an involuntary imprisonment ever since they were an infant. You see, according to Wanda Butler's Social Security file, a beneficiary who I successfully represented at hearing before a Social Security administrative law judge, she was dragged into court, and she testified that she never heard me use the word nigger. However, her sister, Sheila, who, by the way, isn't her sister, she's actually one of Ruth Butler's real children, had claimed that she heard me use that word. And she also claimed that Wanda was there, that I called everybody in a group of people niggers. And Wanda testified truthfully that the incident never happened. There were 5 people at this hearing who were ready to testify because they personally knew about the abuse that Wanda had suffered from these people all of her life. And that includes the fact that at the age of 5, Ruth Butler started to rent her out as a sex toy. I took Wanda to 3 psychologists and a very good shrink, and they all believed that the nightmares she was having were suppressed memories, that she was terribly abused. And when we tried to get further help for Wanda, like sending her to a group, and she wanted to go to a group of people who had been abused, the medical and psychological authorities in this area would not allow it. They just wouldn't allow it. And that's because all of these people knew what the Butlers were doing. They had a long history with social services. There is one instance where one of the Butlers, because he thought it was funny, would wait until one of the Butler babies, and they got babies, believe me, Um, I shouldn't have said that. That's a very Trumpian phrase. Sorry about that. But you can believe this because it's a matter of record. This guy would wait until the baby was like sleeping in front of the TV, and he would take hot sauce and he would put some drops of that hot sauce in the baby's mouth. He thought that was funny. Apparently there was an action by social services about that. That is the most minor thing that social services became involved in relating to Wanda's social service case. But social services would not allow Wanda to be treated. I talked to a woman while Wanda was living in my house in Rock Island. Her name was Ruth Ann. She was with Children and Family Services. And in a meeting that I had with her, which wasn't private, she told me that I should not be messing with the butlers because they have clout. The butlers are a group of people who sell crack cocaine, methamphetamine, and prescription drugs. They do this. There's a record. When I first tried to look up that record after having known Wanda for a little over a month and having seen the police take her to Country Oaks on a complaint which was signed by Ruth Butler, who told the county that I was giving Wanda drugs. That's why she wouldn't come home. Well, they took her to this place, Country Oaks, which everybody knows here is a revolving door for drug addicts and addicts of all kinds. Because they really don't do anything there except collect money off of people's Medicare, Medicaid, and state funds. That's what they do. They don't do anything else. And they dropped Wanda. And guess what? They didn't find any drugs in her because she'd been living with me for over a month. And you know, for a person who has been continually classed as an alcoholic and a drug addict, I have to tell you from my personal experience, I never saw Wanda drink to excess, except once on her birthday, when I had purchased 2 small bottles of Mogan David Concord wine, and that is what we had in our home on New Year's Eve of 2006. And Wanda became inebriated. It's the only time I ever saw her drunk. I never saw her do drugs. But that's beside the point. There was a hearing because the butlers charged me with domestic abuse. And Wanda testified that I'd never abused her and that I had never used any racial epithets in her presence or towards anyone else when she was with me. And you know what? 5 people who wanted to testify and gave up hours of their workday, which they didn't get paid for, in order to try to help this person who had been abused for their whole life. Judge Nancy Tabor decided that they weren't going to testify, and they didn't want me to ask any of the witnesses any questions. And an attorney who volunteered, this guy inserted himself and he volunteered to represent me in this issue, decided to say, just like Bill Vilmont, he's got no questions for the witness. He told me to get people to appear at a hearing for Wanda's benefit. And then he argued against them. They're hearing them. The 7th Judicial District and the state of Iowa and the federal government decided that Wanda Butler should be a sex toy when she was 5 years old. They knew it was going on. They decided that she should be in involuntary imprisonment. When Wanda was committed by the way, they found all kinds of drugs in her when she came back to me, because I committed her in February of 2008 along with Mr. Ehrenberger, who wanted to testify, and they wouldn't let him testify at hearing at that time either. That was 2 hearings they wouldn't let him testify at. Wanda was taken out of the house on February the 8th. Wanda was obtained after I dropped her off, and I had to go get some things, and there were stores around. I said, Wanda, I'll be back in a minute, don't leave. The butlers went to a dentist's office and confiscated her and took her to a crack house at 415 West 13th Street. And that house was under constant surveillance. They were under surveillance before that date. And when Wanda went into that house, I can tell you that I have recordings and evidence that Wanda didn't leave that house for 4 days until she was picked up by the Davenport police and taken to 2 North on the commitment that Joe Ehrenberger and I had filed 4 days before. And when they dropped her on that occasion, she had barbiturates, she had cocaine, and that's, cocaine leaves your system after 18 hours. She had cocaine, she had weed. I really don't care about the weed. She had pharmaceutical drugs in her. Oh, she had a potpourri of drugs in her. At this hearing about her drug commitment. And I didn't file a drug commitment, by the way. That was changed. I filed a commitment because these people were giving her drugs. I filed a commitment because they were abusing her. They decided that even though they had evidence that these people were giving her drugs, they weren't going to mess with the butlers. And the judge said that Wanda could do her drug rehab while living in the crack house located at 415 West 13th Street, Davenport. Isn't that amazing? Wanda is a person who never had a chance. She never had a chance. Never. It's the saddest thing that I ever saw. I still cry about it. I can't get over it. That's why I keep doing the things I'm doing. And that's why I want these answers. They don't want me to get answers. Right now, I've been told, well, you have a warrant out for your arrest. It should be afternoon now. Yes. So I'm going to call the public defender's office and see if they can sort this thing out. Because a couple of weeks ago, I was approached by some Davenport policemen who slapped my glasses off. They weren't wearing name tags, by the way. That's one of the things the pigs around here will do. They won't wear their entire uniform when they want to beat you up. In any case, they know where I live. And if there's been a warrant out for my arrest for a month, why aren't they doing their job? And how come it's still possible to get pictures of Davenport policemen in uniform standing in groups of people in front of shenanigans who are selling dope, and these guys are just there apparently just to count the deals and figure out how much money is owed to them that night from the sale of the cocaine. And I'm not making that up. I looked at that problem for 12 years. There's a bunch of stuff. There's videotape and pictures on the web. And that's why the Davenport pigs break my glasses and beat me up. And now, what they want to do is they want to intimidate me because I want to go to a city council meeting because I've got a recording that's 1.5 minutes long. And it's a story that was covered by a television station hundreds of miles away from here, yet in the community, where two people, two policemen, uniformed officers, attacked a woman and half blinded her and left her with physical and neurological difficulties, these people are still allowed to be policemen. The city of Davenport and the county of Scott has a long history of that kind of shit. I would like to know why those two policemen are still pigs. They're still allowed to be pigs. They're still attacking people. They're still breaking my glasses. The city of Davenport now owes me 2 pairs of glasses. But they don't want me to play that tape in front of the city council. They don't want me to do that. So they're trying to chase me away. So I'm going to play it for you. If you go to my pages on Facebook and you go to YouTube, you can find a video about bad cops. I'm going to put that link on my Facebook pages, and I'm going to make another video, and I'm going to play on YouTube, because you only have to go into that hour-long video or an hour and a half or whatever, however long it is, because it's lots of different news stories about pigs who use excessive force, who beat people up, and who shoot people dead. Some of those people on that tape who were shot dead weren't being violent. They weren't being uncooperative. They didn't do anything. They just got shot. And the city of Davenport is featured on one of those because they got 2 officers who beat up a woman because her husband was hired to give a lecture on race relations to the Davenport Police Department, who I have a recording of telling me, you can't tell them, don't tell us how to do our job. Now, when they told me that, I was in the Davenport Police Station with a VCR tape of the drug activities that were going on in the vicinity of the Linden. And I happened to remark, there's so much stuff that goes on there 24/7. You guys ought to really have a walking patrol that's only 2 blocks away from the station. They told me that they would arrest me if I didn't leave, and I should take my shit with me, which was prima facie evidence of people that they're in business with selling dope. They didn't want to see any more of that. They don't want that entered as evidence. So I took my shit with me, but after I told them they should have a walking patrol. Less than 2 months later, a guy who was upstairs in the Linden smoking crack with some people that he was buying it from left his girlfriend's baby in the back seat of a car with the windows up on a hot day. He is doing time for the death of that baby. But that could have been prevented, because these Davenport policemen, the one who slapped my glasses off my face the other night, this guy's got a big fat ass. Taking a little walk every day is not going to hurt him. They could have prevented that baby's death. But they don't want to do anything about the drug dealing at the Linden. And finally, while I was investigating the Linden had a fire. Now, the Davenport Fire Department, these are the people who do the building inspections, which is not a good idea because there's 2 seriously corrupt agencies in Davenport, besides the City Hall. The City Hall's involvement in the corruption is coincidental. However, the corruption that the Davenport Fire Department showed in the investigation of the fire at the Linden was just criminal. What I read in the paper is they believe that fire was started because somebody took a Bic lighter and smashed it on the floor and lit the butane. That couldn't possibly happen because butane just burns in a flash. It's a gas, as a matter of fact. It wouldn't have happened. And just to make sure, after that was done, I did conduct some experiments with wood and smashed butane lighters, and I couldn't even get anything to light. It just evaporates. However, I was in the Linden when the fire broke out. And I see two guys go into the Linden who just don't belong there. Two white guys. They weren't dressed like the ragamuffins, drug dealers who live at the Linden. They were kind of more of a mafioso business attire kind of appearance. They entered the Linden. I didn't see them when I was in the Linden. Now, nobody saw me in the Linden because I was in disguise. I am actually the man of 1,000 faces. But I do know that as I was leaving the Linden, there was a fire. Fire department arrived shortly thereafter. The recordings of that, there are videos and pictures of that fire. You can see them on Free World KGB. But the fact of the matter is that there were either, now those people might not have set a fire. Also, because the Linden, at least 80% of the apartments there were ragtag. They were not supposed to be occupied. And in the evenings, during a lot of drug sales, I would see lots of people go into that place, and they were sleeping in those vacant apartments, and they were sleeping in the halls, and I know that. That place was a big crack hotel. Every year, Lee Enterprises had to replace the screens on the Linden. They did that every year for several years. I watched that. I videotaped it. And the reason I was interested in those screens is because crack makes people really paranoid. They didn't want people carrying money and drugs. Money upstairs, they let them carry it upstairs. But they didn't want them carrying drugs back downstairs after they had given up their money. And what these customers would do is they would wait under a window, and somebody from a third or a fourth floor window would drop a bag of crack to them. I had videotapes of that. They're in a safe jurisdiction now because the pigs want to destroy that evidence. That's how it works here. In any case, it's about time for me to call the public defender and find out if I can get any help in checking out this false report which was made to me about a arrest warrant which hasn't been served on me in over a month. Yet, during the time when that's supposed to be served, people can grind my glasses into the dust after physically assaulting me. You know, and when I started this, I knew that it wasn't going to be pleasant. But I couldn't believe Wanda and the Butlers that they had to deal with the pigs on both sides of the river. And you know, when it's both sides of the river, that does involve the Justice Department. And I wrote about that. That's one of the reasons for my unwarranted federal prosecution. In any case, I didn't do anything to break the law. I haven't harassed anybody. I'm just trying to get a question answered. And these people don't want to answer questions. And you know, they can't take the fifth because the question doesn't directly concern their criminality. It has nothing to do with, I don't know anything about what criminality people at the ORA orthopedic clinic may have conducted. I don't recall any of the faces that I saw in that clinic from the files that my website crew has assembled making their videotapes and taking pictures of people selling drugs. So I don't know what those people are doing that they're paranoid about. But apparently, during the time when I was communicating with ORA and Iowa City Hospitals and the City Hall, somebody wanted to say, I'm being harassed. Yeah, I'm harassing them. I don't think so. I have recordings of those conversations. I'm just asking a question. And I'm a citizen. I used to be a taxpayer before the feds stole everything I had. This is Dmitry Ivanovich with the Naked Truth.